What? You've never seen a grown man in overalls tying a tie before? Well, today is a very special day because we are transplanting the babies into the garden. And so over the course of the last 7 days, I have been hardening them off. And in today's video, I'm going to take you through that 7-day process so you can harden off your plant babies, transplant them into the garden, and have a 100% success rate. All right, day one of the hardening off process here, folks. And so if you want to have a day-by-day guide to have on hand as you begin to harden your plant babies off, then in the description of this video, I've put together a step-by-step guide that's going to go through everything that we're about to cover off on in this video. So you can just click down there, download that, have that on hand while you're hardening your plant babies off. And so for today, as day one in our hardening off process, all that I'm doing is taking our plants outside from being under the grow lights and into direct sun for 2 hours of the day. So day one, 2 hours outside to begin the hardening off process. All right, so while our babies hang out in the sun here, I think it kind of begs the question, like, what is the hardening off process and why does it matter? And so when we think about our plant babies, they've been living in a very comfortable environment indoors underneath the grow lights. But when we bring them outside to the garden here, there is going to be a lot more intensity and variability in the conditions that they're going to be experiencing. So for instance, right now, they are getting their first exposure to the sun. And so the grow lights that they've been underneath up until now, when we use our light meter app, they're getting about 20,000 lumens per day in there. But once we're outside in the sun here, we're now up to 76,000 lumens coming from that direct sun. So that intensity is something that we want to prepare our plant babies for, not all at once, but rather day by day with an incremental approach. And so after 2 hours, all that we need to do is bring them back inside, pop them underneath their grow lights, and allow them to recover a little bit from that first exposure to the elements. Alrighty, grab my raincoat here because we're gonna need this for today. And so for day two of the hardening off process, we are taking our plant babies outside and exposing them to the intensity and the variability of the outdoors for 4 hours. So we're climbing from 2 hours to 4 hours. And so as we continue to prepare our babies for the intensity and the variability of the outdoors, the next element that we want to expose them to and prepare them for is the rain. And so when we think about it indoors, they've been getting a very consistent, very gentle watering of a turkey base right at the soil level, exactly as they've needed. But as we move them to the outdoors, there are going to be days on end where heavy rains will be coming down. And then other stretches where there'll be multiple days in a row of really, really hot and dry drought conditions. And so if you have rain in your forecast, let it just come down on them. But if you don't have rain on your forecast, this is where you can simulate it. And so what I'm going to do is grab my hose and come over to them and really just give them a really big, heavy watering here. This is just like the Pacific Northwest rains that we get here, exactly what they're going to be experiencing at different points throughout the season. And then once I've given them that really big watering, I'm again just letting them hang out outside for 4 hours today. And then at the end of 4 hours, I'm simply grabbing them, bringing them back indoors underneath the grow lights for the remainder of the day. Alrighty, I am just bundling up here because it's gonna be a bit blustery out there today. Alrighty, so day 3 is here and the plant babies are heading back outside. And now so far we've gone day 1 outside for 2 hours, day 2 outside for 4 hours, and so for day 3, we're gonna keep them outside here for 6 hours. And while I have them out here on day 3 for their 6 hours, what's the next element that we need to introduce them to? And that is wind. And so when we think about where they've been living in that grow light stand, they've been getting a gentle breeze from a oscillating fan, really just the perfect amount of wind that they would need. But now when we get them outside here in the garden, they're going to be exposed to some huge gusts of wind. But on today, there's not really much wind at all. So how do we help prepare them for this? Well, this is where I head into my shed and I grab a little something. Say hello to my little friend. And now all that I'm going to do is stand fairly far away and give them a couple big gusts of wind. Now, yes, this is a bit of an over-exaggeration and you do not need to go out and buy a leaf blower or anything along those lines, but I did just want to illustrate the point that, again, they're going to be experiencing more intensity, more variability, so the more that we can expose them to that in increments, the better. And so now after 6 hours, all that I'm doing is picking them back up, bringing them back inside, and allowing them to rest and recover underneath the grow lights for the rest of the day. All right, so as we get to day 4 and 5 of the hardening off process, all that we're doing is continuing to leave them outside for longer periods of time. So on day 4, we're gonna leave them outside for 10 hours. And then on day 5, we're going to increase that up to 12 hours. And you might notice some wilting during these days, and that's totally normal. So just double check to make sure that there's some moisture in the soil. And if there is, then everything will be all good and they're just continuing to acclimatize. All right, folks, day 6 is here, and this is always the day that I'm most nervous about. And so today we're gonna bring the plant babies outside, and we're going to not only leave them out for the entirety of the day, but for the first time, we're gonna leave them outside overnight. So far we've talked about the sunlight and how intense it is. We've talked about the rain, we've talked about the wind, but we haven't talked about temperature. And the single biggest factor on whether or not our plant babies survive is the average nighttime low temperature. And that's why for me, day 6 is such a big one, because we are now going to be exposing them to that nighttime low temperature. And it begs the question, like, what temperature should I be looking for? And so for our cooler weather crops, such as kales and broccolis and Swiss chard, we're looking for an average nighttime low of 8 Celsius. And then for our warmer weather crops, such as our tomatoes, our peppers, our zucchinis, our cucumbers, we're looking for an average nighttime low of 10 Celsius. So before you put your babies outside for the very first evening, make sure that you check your weather app beforehand to see what those temperatures are looking like, so that you're not putting them out there in the middle of a cold snap. But if it's at least 8 Celsius for our cooler weather crops and 10 Celsius for our warmer weather crops, we should be all good. And this is all outlined in the guide that I alluded to at the very beginning, with the link to it down in the description of this video. So these babies, they ain't going anywhere for the next 24 hours. All right, I'm not sure if you're able to see them out there, but first night outside. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous here, but see how they do. You didn't really think I was going to let them spend their first night out in the garden all on their own, did you? No, I'll be camped out here the whole night with them, making sure they're okay. Just wish I could give them my toque.
Okay, let's see how our babies did. Looking pretty good.
Alrighty, so they've made it through the night and they're looking really good, really happy, still standing nice and strong, full of life. So I think we're in a really great spot. And so now with today being day 7, it's the final day of the hardening off process. And on this day, I do nothing. I just leave them out here all through the day and through the evenings, so that on day 8, we can begin transplanting them. And we've made it. So folks, it is day 8 and we are officially transplanting. And so just before we transplant them into the beds here, folks, for those of you that I have not met before, I'm Jordan from Mind and Soil, where we're looking to introduce 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. So if you're looking for more peacefulness, more joy, more restoration, and more playfulness in your life, then I really encourage you to subscribe to our channel here, because we put out new videos just like this one every single week to be taking as much of the guesswork out of gardening as possible, so that you too can be experiencing just how amazing it is for your mental health and well-being. And so with that being said, let's get into transplanting these babies into their forever home. And there's one super important thing that we do before we put them in. It's why I'm dressed up, and that is our graduation photo. It's an exciting day. And so now when it comes to transplanting, it's really straightforward. Regardless of if you're in a raised bed, container, in-ground bed, all that you need to do is first measure out and dig a hole to be transplanting into. Then you're going to grab 1 handful of worm castings and sprinkle that in. And follow that with 1 tablespoon of our 444 superfood, or an organic fertilizer. Then gently massage that into the bottom of your transplant hole, and then go ahead and pop your plant baby out of its seed cell, loosen the roots a little bit, and then pop it into its home. Then backfill with the surrounding soil. And then as a top dressing, you're gonna do one more handful of worm castings and 1 tablespoon of 4-4-4 superfood or an organic fertilizer. Massage that into the top 1 inch and then give it a big drink of water to settle in. Alrighty, so this baby here has been hardened off, has now been transplanted, and has all the nutrients and microbes that it needs to begin absolutely thriving in its forever home. Now, I'm actually gonna hang tight on transplanting the rest of these because it's way too early for me to be doing this right now. But I really wanted to put this video together so that you can see exactly what to be doing in terms of hardening off and transplanting as you go through that over the coming weeks, months, whenever it might be that you get this video. So I'm gonna hang tight on the rest of these, but if you follow this process that we've gone through over the course of the last 7 days to harden your babies off, I know that you'll have a 100% success rate. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. Otherwise, I can't wait to catch you on the next one. Go get those hands dirty, and I'll see you soon.